We know entering Stanford is the beginning, and you mentioned a bit about like after entering, they may have those life situations and foreseeable situations that they may need to overcome. How about like any additional character you see to help them like succeed throughout the years and also like graduate with a flying color? Like, we know it's not easy.
Yeah, no, it's not. And I remember actually, and I told my students, I always gave my students this simple advice, is that, and it came from Tom Friedman. Tom Friedman being the New York Times very, very successful journalist, but he also have written many books, right? Yeah. So years ago, I attended a conference that he was a keynote speaker in Shanghai, and it was a business conference with hundreds of executives. And Tom Friedman at that time just published a bestseller. The book is called The World is Flat. So the world is flat. And his idea is the world is flat because of the rise of the internet, which would flatten the world so that people can innovate in India, people can innovate in China, people can innovate anywhere because they are able to access information. And so the world is flat, meaning it's no longer superiority only confined to the West or like US or Japan. And after the talk, one of the executives asked Q&A, right? Asked Thomas Friedman. He said, "Mr. Friedman, wow, this is very exciting. The world is flat, so China is going to be the next big economy, powerful economy." And this is a Caucasian man. And he said, "Sir, I have two boys. I'm going to go home and tell my boys to start learning Chinese because I think Chinese is important. East and West connection and so on." And Mr. Friedman's answer is that, no, you should not go back and tell your boys to learn Chinese. I think you should tell them to learn how to learn. So at first, a lot of people say, well, what do you mean by learn how to learn? And his point is that maybe it's necessary for you to learn Chinese in a certain situation. Maybe in another situation, you need to learn Russian. Or maybe in another situation, you learn how to understand technology. Or maybe understand how the needs of the underdeveloped economy. We all need to learn how to learn new situations and make our mastering of the needs and be able to provide new capabilities and serve and be able to contribute. And so learning to learn. So I always was struck by that. I said, gee, so I have always told my students is that learning a computer program is a means. Learning a new language, learning AI these days, everyone says that we should learn machine learning, is learning a technique. And techniques are all kinds of techniques. Today is AI. Last decade, people say you have to learn internet. I still remember when the fax machine came out, people say, wow, yeah, we have to learn how to fax. Wow, yeah. So those are techniques and means and the language. But if you know how to learn new things and be sensitive to the environment and the conditions that you are faced with, I think that's what makes a person to be successful in the long run. So learning to learn is something I would advise even a young boy, a young girl, and then a youth, and an adult forever, and an executive. That's always something useful, I think, to remember.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. Like, we never know, right? Yeah. We didn't have AI before. Now, like, it's so prominent now. True. Thank you, Dr. Hau. So how about like, so how can, like, as parents, like you are a parent, I'm a parent, like the example you mentioned, how can we help our children acquire those like characters or character traits, like learn how to learn, have a love of learning, and being resilient to overcome challenges. And also
I'm not an expert really on parenthood, right? Yeah, I think you perhaps know much more, given that you interact with many parents and you have been coaching many of them. Yeah, but I do think that if I translate what I learned from Stanford to being a parent, and I think that the number one is we should give a lot of degree of freedom for a child to be willing to explore. And we don't want to predestine them. Okay, yeah, I want you to be a medical doctor at that time. I think this is what sometimes my parents' generation like to. Yeah, okay, I hope that you become a good top government official or a medical doctor at that time, but to explore, to be willing to try and be given that degree of freedom, meaning that we encourage as well as we support them if they fail, if they did not try one thing for forever. Yeah. So I went to Africa many years ago. I was the director of the Institute of Innovation for Developing Economies by Stanford, and they sent me, and we started an institute in Ghana serving West Africa. And so we have a chance to talk to the high school students in Africa, and we asked them, what is your aspiration? What do you like to grow up to become? Now, in the US, in California, many of them will say, well, I want to have my own startup. Yeah, there's some high school students that say, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be an inventor. I want to found a new Google, that type. But in Africa, we were surprised that 90% of the students says that I want to be a government servant. A government servant. I said, well, gee, that's your aspiration. The aspiration is to work for the government. I think its reason is probably because in Africa, working for the government will be considered to be a safe job. It's a safe, like iron ball type, yeah. And and there is no other choice. To them, entrepreneurship is something that they would never have heard of or never want to try, and it's something that they say, well, I'm not good for it. So the idea is the parents perhaps also have kind of coached them to say, hey, yeah, don't think of something else. Yeah, just be a good government servant. If you can get into the government, your life would be safe that time. So parents should provide degree of freedom, should encourage and provide them with being willing to failure. But we also don't look too much on the end result, but also see how in the process can they enrich themselves, can they learn something, can they find new hobbies in the interim and so on. Because, well, just like I told you about the end result, people like to recite what kind of accomplishment and forget how they got there. I think that's very, very important to do that. Yeah. So many years ago, I read in a Harvard Business Review article that says that in Japan, some of these not for the tourists, temples that are touristy. The tourists would go to see the Japanese temple, right? Some of the real temples are all high in the mountain, very, very difficult to get to because they're not for tourists, right? They're really for people who really want to meditate and worship and so on. And they're high up in the mountain, and there are hundreds of steps that you have to walk up before you reach the temple. And the head of the temple was interviewed, and he said, well, why don't you build a temple closer to the city so that more people can easy to worship? And the head of the temple says that, look, the hundreds of the steps is part of the worship. When you're walking one step, two step, and all the 100 steps before you reach the temple, you're not worshiping when you reach the temple. You're worshiping while you are walking the step, because you have to focus. You have to focus, you're not thinking about other things, and you are looking at the step. And so we have to focus on the process and not the end result. And I hope that we would always advise our children to say, hey, don't think of the end result. Think about the steps that you get there, and the process that you get there. You may be learning a lot of things already, not until you get to the end result. So I think parents should hopefully focus more on these kind of dimensions.
Wow, thank you, Dr. Hau Lee. This is a very good reminder for parents. Very eye-opening for me to focus on the process, and very good analogy. Like during the walk is already part of the worship, and that's focus on the process, giving them freedom, and also very supportive, right? Even they fail, we continue to provide support. And you mentioned fail cheap, fail fast.
That's right. Hopefully they don't fail big, right? If they see them going to a very wrong way, that we have to pull them back. So
it's not easy to be parents. Yeah, that's good. So we give them the safety net. We are kind of the safety nets. Allow them freedom to explore, to whatever exploration they have to explore, and go for it. I see. Thank you, Dr. Hau Lee. We are so precious to have your time with us today. So I'm sure your talk has benefited many parents already. And thank you again for your precious time.
Thank you, Candy. Thank you, and best wishes to your work.
Thank you.